5 years ago, we had a budget, we had a big deficit, we had a big tax increase, but at the time it was about shared sacrifice, that we all had to share, all aspects of society, government, etc. And if we just did that, we would move forward into prosperity. Well, we saw that that didn't work, and there we ended up again this year. And this time we ended up with another big deficit and another big tax increase, second one in a row. But this time, it was about a brighter tomorrow. If we just passed this budget, we would have a brighter tomorrow for the state of Connecticut. But we know it's not working. Each and every one of us in this room know it's not working. And it's not because we're telling you. I don't want you to take our word for it. We see that we're one of 4 states who've lost population in the last year, last in job creation in many years, one of the least business-friendly states. I know you've heard us say that a million times. And one of the worst business tax policies in the country. Because we talked about in these meetings for the past 5 weeks, we talked about what are those structural long-term changes. We talked about a constitutional spending cap, as you've heard today. We talked about voting on union contracts, as you've heard today. We talked about closing the Connecticut Juvenile Training School at some point in the near future. We talked about bidding in a fair way a correctional health care plan. You read the amendment. But what we heard at the meetings were words like this. What we have is components of long-term structural changes in our bill. We want to solve the problem, and we're hoping to accomplish those goals. That all sounds great, certainly positive, and I know that your motives are pure. I certainly believe all my colleagues that when they say they want to do the best for the state of Connecticut. But here's the difference. And when you get down to a different perspective and a different approach, here's the difference. Instead of when we hear there are components of long-term structural changes, we say we have long-term structural changes. When we hear words like we want to solve the problem, we say here's a way to solve the problem. And when I hear you are hoping to accomplish something, we're saying here's how you accomplish something, but you have to take the action. We don't have the luxury anymore. We don't have the luxury of trying to fix this piecemeal. We stick gum in the hole, and then lo and behold, we're shocked when 3 or 4 months goes by and there's a deficit. If we were not facing a $550 million deficit next year and a $3.5 billion deficit for the 2 years after, I could have stood here, we would have stayed in that room and said, listen guys, we can agree to maybe 90% of these cuts. Let's just really batten down the hatches here and get to the rest of it. But we could not, with a clear conscience, fit and cover this $350 million deficit without making structural changes, real structural changes that do things, that don't talk about doing things, that don't set up a committee to talk about possibly doing something, that don't set up a study to talk about a group that might talk about doing something at some point next session. Because that's what we're doing here. We don't have the luxury of plugging the hole like that anymore. So unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen of this chamber, I respect the work that was put into this. I think everybody's motives are pure, but it is no longer enough for the state of Connecticut.